Astra Travelers, and welcome to another episode of Tales of Teyvat, a Genshin Lore Podcast. Last week, we packed up all our water as we journeyed into the desert and discussed the desert gods. We're still trying to trace Deshret's family tree on Ancestry, but we really haven't gotten very far. This week, we'll be discussing the Bloodstained Knight. Additionally, I want to remind travelers to visit talesofteyvat.com to see visual representations of the lore mentioned during today's podcast. Your guides have put them together for you to make things a little easier to understand. On our site, you can also find some awesome goodies, including artist spotlights from the community for each episode, wallpapers for download, and a way to check out some of our favorite Genshin merch. Finally, feel free to email us at talesofteyvatpod@gmail.com to let us know what you think of this week's episode and what topics you'd like to see in the future. So today we're going to be talking about the Bloodstained Knight, which is another one of those elusive character titles that not everyone might have heard about.
Mm-hmm. This is the sequel to the Viridescent Venerer episode.
And the Crimson Witch, aka Rosalind.
Yeah.
We're connecting the dots in a lot of these. But you would know the story if you are going for a physical DPS Kaya main.
Me. It calls me right out.
Physical DPS or physical damage in Genshin right now isn't as great as like some of the reactions right now, but it can still be like chef's kiss. It really depends, but I highly recommend getting yourself a 4-set of this. You know, we love.
Yeah, and that would be the Bloodstained Chivalry artifact set.
Yes, in Leeway.
Which is what talks about the Bloodstained Knight, just to make that clear.
Mm-hmm.
And I have Eula, and I want to build her, and I don't know if I should get this set or keep what I have on her, which is like cryo. So let me know.
Who's a Eula?
Excuse.
She's that NPC thing.
The NPC, you know, the character that's never been out.
She's Amber's girlfriend. Hello.
Oh, Mika's boss.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I see.
I love it.
Interesting. I hope she becomes playable soon.
That would be wonderful.
3.8, man.
I keep saving things up until she does.
Exactly.
This is why I'm like, what artifact should I get for this NPC? Because she's about to hit playable.
If you want a physical damage Eula, this is the set for her.
Yeah, again, just to be clear too, we're all just joking because Eula has not had a banner run in like 3,000 years, so we're all waiting for it to come back.
Over 300 days.
I don't even know who you guys are talking about. But I do want to backstep. So today we're going to be talking about the Bloodstained Knight. And the Bloodstained Knight is mentioned in the artifact set, as Tiff said, the Bloodstained Chivalry set, which can be found over in Leeway at the Clear Pool and Mountain Cavern domain. It's kind of back behind like Cloud Retainer's hangout spot. Besides physical damage, if you have a 4-piece set of it, it's also great for charged attacks and it reduces your stamina. So, you know, really the non-magical way of going in Genshin. But if you got Dendro, you don't need that. No, I'm joking. I do have physical damage characters too. But despite the fact that our domain is over in Leeway, the story of the Bloodstained Knight actually takes us back to old Mondstadt, which we've visited twice, as Al mentioned in our old past episodes. So we're going back to a very close to, but pre-Cataclysm Mondstadt for this story.
Yes.
And some of you might remember us talking about La Senora, aka Rosalie, who also was alive back in the days of Mondstadt before the Cataclysm. You also might remember us talking about Viri, aka the Viridescent Venerer, who wasn't necessarily from Mondstadt, but did have interaction with some of these old school Mondstadt characters, including the person who killed her. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah. Rest in peace.
I thought it might be helpful if we start and lay out some of the key players in today's story, because a few of these characters have a few names, which is very typical of the Fatui.
No, everybody in this game has 35 names.
I don't.
Well, if you're a traveler, you do.
Oh my god.
Not wrong.
This just became very meta.
But yeah, I mean, everybody seems to have multiple names or some sort of title. And then the more important they are, the more names they get. We could just assume that they're just going to keep growing. So the Bloodstained Knight is also known as the White Knight, back where our story begins in Old Mondstadt. We also believe that his name is Roland. While there's no specific text that is 100% concrete on it, there are some assumptions that we can make to say that his name actually is Roland. So
then we have Arundhalen, who is one of the prior Grand Masters. And every time I go to say Grand Master, I want to say acting Grand Master, but Jean is the only acting Grand Master we know of so far.
Mm.
And Arundhalen is also known as the Lion of Light.
Rawr.
Rawr.
Which would be like what the Lion of the South? Is that the direction of the lion?
Oh God, I don't know. There's too many fucking directionals in Mondstadt.
Yeah, the directions don't make any sense.
What are the four winds again?
The Dragon of the East, Wolf of the North, Lion of the South.
But we're going to jump into the 3 other quick characters. We're going to have Rostam, who is also known as the Wolf Pup and member of the Knights of Favonius. We will have the Maiden Beloved, who is currently unknown what their actual name was. You might recognize that from another artifact set. And we'll have, of course, our beautiful, wonderful Viri, aka the Viridescent Venerer. And we're going to mention a blind brother.
There's a blind brother, just hanging about.
I mean, we mentioned it in Viries. He dies at some point.
Maybe.
Spoilers.
I think he's Timmy.
Damn it.
You know what? Everybody's Timmy.
No.
Well,
Everybody's
Timmy's not blind, is
Timmy's
he?
not blind.
Timmy might
You
be
don't
blind.
know. He's never mentioned what he can see and not see.
He can see us scaring away the birds.
Nah, he hears that. He smells the death.
Don't you think if Timmy were blind, he would be like, I'm so blind and I heard that you killed those ducks. And so how could you do this to someone that is so incapacitated by his sight?
No, because I think Timmy's actually selfless. So he's not mad that you're killing them because he wants them. He's mad that you're recklessly killing pigeons.
The things that he wants to kill, right?
No, he doesn't want to kill anything.
No, I'm talking about the ducks, not the pigeons, the ducks.
Well, we go feed the ducks. We don't kill the ducks.
Yeah, we scare away the ducks.
No, do you not know this? When Timmy gives you that quest to go feed the ducks, you can kill the ducks instead.
Yeah.
And then he throws a fit and you have to go apologize to him the next day.
Do you know what this reminds me of? Shout out to everyone who is in English class at the moment reading Catcher in the Rye. Where did the ducks go?
I've never read
Where did
that.
the ducks go? Oh my God, you lucky.
I was an English nerd too. I was in the AP Englishes and everything. I never read Catcher in the Rye.
Really? See, I actually read Catcher in the Rye before I had to in school because one Thanksgiving my family was talking about how the person that murdered John Lennon
had it in his pocket.
Yeah, he referenced Catcher in the Rye and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, wait, but what do you mean? So I ended up reading it when I was I don't know, 13.
I never read it. I was forced to read The Great Gatsby.
I didn't read that either.
I can also understand that. I did not enjoy The Great Gatsby. There are some very short stories that he's done that are beautiful. I can't get The Great Gatsby. That's because I fucking hate Daisy. I hate her. I hate her so fucking much.
I mean, I was forced to read it in the 7th grade, and I thought it was so boring.
It is, because it's how can you relate to these upper echelon, New Yorkers who have mansions on the bay?
Yeah. I was a gay boy in Oklahoma, in rural Oklahoma. I'm I don't care about any of this.
You know what I did relate to? Of Mice and Men.
Didn't read that either.
Well, you know what, Beans? It only matters if you read the Bloodstained Chivalry. So you're good.
Trying.
Let's bring it all back.
Well, so let's bring it back to when the Bloodstained Knight wasn't the Bloodstained Knight. And we had, hypothetically speaking, Roland, a young Roland, joining the Knights of Favonius. He is taught by Rostam,
the young wolf pup.
And Rostam was the second in command of Arundhalen at the time, who was the Grand Master of the Knights of Favonius.
If you guys want more info on Rostam, just listen to our Rosaline episode.
Yeah, we're going to constantly be harkening back to Rosaline, the Signora episode, and the Viridescent Venerer episode from season 1.
AKA Viri.
Viri, our little honey Viri. So Rostam was...
Honey Nut Lesbio.
She she was. Rostam, he grew up with Arundhelen, who was the actual commander of the Knights of Favonius. And fun thing about Rostam is Rostam actually developed the blade works of Favonia, like the Favonius blade works, which at this point, you've heard about the blade works of Favonius. So Rostam actually developed that. Well, most of it. Arundhelen developed part of it, and that got lost to time. I think Rostam had a vision and Arundhelen did not. Arundhelen was just like a big meathead, and Rostam actually had a vision. So Rostam was from a peasant family where Arundhelen was from nobility. So Arundhelen was sort of automatically given the title of the Grand Master, whereas Rostam was his shadow, even though they were best friends.
Big question. I can't remember if we went over this or not, but is Arundhelen a Gunhilder?
We don't know.
Ooh.
We know he's the Lion of the Light.
That's true.
Which could be like a gene relation.
Mm-hmm. And the Gunhilders have like a long legacy of being either in the Knights or Grand Masters.
Yeah, doesn't Jean have some kind of lion name?
Well, she's the Dandelion Knight, but she wanted to be the Lion Fang Knight. But her constellation is a lion, a roaring lion.
But spoiler alert, Arundhelen dies. I don't think we know if he has kids or anything, do we?
I don't think so. He kind of loses all of his want to kind of be like anybody anymore after Rostam dies. That's where he kind of doesn't continue making blade work or doing anything like that too. He just kind of makes himself secluded and is very depressed.
Yeah, he becomes very, very depressed.
And I would assume that when you're depressed like that, you don't have kids.
Sometimes.
Maybe he already had kids.
Could be. Yeah, there's nothing really saying one way or the other. So, we don't actually know. And I don't think there's anything that actually goes that far back into any of their lineage.
Yeah, we don't really know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think it would be all speculation at this point.
I don't know. I feel like he didn't have kids, but I don't know. That's totally just me. I have no reason. I have no real rhyme or reason. I just feel like he lost his bestie and the whole world was collapsing around them. And he probably, for travelers don't know, the cataclysm had just happened, might have even still been happening, and he lost his friend and whatever. I don't want to spoil too much. Anyway, Rostam, the wolf pup, was training Roland, the White Knight, to become a Knight of Favonius, which I think is really cute. Personally, I love comparing Rostam and Arundhelen to Diluc and Kaya. Kind of what you were just saying, how one of them was kind of from an aristocracy of sorts, had more power and money, and the other one kind of came from nothing, but they were besties, which makes me nervous about Kaya and his life. But anyway, I think it's interesting.
Who would be Roland in that situation then? If Diluc and Kaya are your Rostam and an Arundhelen.
It's B. Bennett.
Oh, well, it could be a few people because Kaya is actually very well known for training new knights.
That's true.
Diluc would be Rostam.
Mm-hmm.
No, really?
Yeah, I thought going back to the Rosalind, aka La Senora episode, I think we landed on that Rostam is Diluc, Jean is La Senora, and Kaya is Arundhelen.
Or Jean could be Arundhelen.
Yes.
I'm flipping it for now. I like Arundhelen as Diluc now.
Rostam is Diluc because Rostam was very super serious. He always had this furrowed brow. The only one that could get him to unfurrow his brow was Senora.
AKA Jean in Diluc's situation.
Right. But just to remind everyone, Rostam was Senora's lover. And Senora had gone to Sumeru to study magic. And then while she was gone, the cataclysm started happening. And then Rostam died. And then when she came back, that's what turned her into evil Senora. And, Rostam was also rumored to have a secret spy network, which we all know that Diluc is a part of now. So,
well, regardless, Kai is known for training people, including Mika and Bennett. And Mika says that, Kaya took him under his wing and did a lot of tests for him. So that's his thing, I think. But anyway, so Rostam was training Roland. And when he was training Roland, he really focused on instilling the rights of justice, what is right and wrong, chivalry into Roland. And Roland took that way too seriously. And he became like obsessed with chivalry and justice for all. Like he was very dedicated to just doing the right thing, and he felt like doing the just thing would give him all of the awards and accolades that he needed. And he really, I mean, it felt like this guy didn't even need money. And he would do really well in Fontaine. I feel like him and the Hydro Archon would have been besties.
They'd be bougie besties.
But I mean, White Knight even kind of comes into our world outside of Teyvat, because we've all heard of the knight in shining armor and in all the fairy tales when everybody's saved by this knight. He is in Teyvat, that White Knight, that savior, that person that's going to get everybody out of trouble and be wonderful and all that kind of jazz.
And in juxtaposition, there's the Black Knight. And like, though every time I think of a Black Knight, I think of, 'tis but a flesh wound. But most of the time, like, we have the shining White Knight, very honorable and justice forward, while the Black Knight is kind of the roguish knight.
It's very much like a cautionary tale of extremes, because we know Arundhalen, he was sort of like a reluctant leader. Like, he was expected to become the Grand Master of the Knights of Favonius. And then you have Rostam, who probably wanted it more than Arundhalen, but because he was from a peasant family, he became Arundhalen's second in command. And then you have Rostam, who there are all these rumors about he's like running the spy network behind Arundhalen's back. And he mentors Roland, or who became the White Knight, and instilled in him all of these ideas of chivalry and justice. And it's almost like Roland took these ideas and like just became obsessed and like went way too far with all of them. So you have like his teachers who were sort of in the middle and like in a moral gray area, and then you have their student who is like actually takes what they're preaching as gospel and just goes off the deep end with it.
It goes way too far.
And so he becomes the White Knight. He becomes known as that. And he catches the eye of a particular woman known as the Maiden Beloved.
Yeah, he saves her. She's the damsel in distress.
Yeah, what does he save her from exactly? Like,
It's unclear.
It's probably a cat in a tree. It's nothing.
A cat in a tree.
I feel like she like tripped in a puddle and he like picked her up.
I mean, to her, absolutely saved her fucking life. Too awesome. Like, this dumb bitch. Yeah, it's not really stated.
Well, at that point, he's so obsessed with chivalry and justice that like whatever he does to save her, she immediately falls in love. That's what the whole Maiden Beloved artifact set is about, is like her being in love with him.
She says time stops for her.
Yeah. And she tries to reward him with something, and he's like, oh no, chivalry is its own reward. Like, he's so in the depths of his obsession with chivalry at that point that he's like, no, don't worry about it, but I will take that flower that you want to give me and adorn it upon my armor.
Like, woohoo, I'm gonna put it right here for you, lovey, so everybody can see. Look what I got from this damsel who I helped.
It's kind of like the idea of giving someone a handkerchief before they go out and like, here, a token. I just remember it from Shrek.
But yeah, the Maiden Beloved, like, she sounds a little, they both sound crazy, which makes them almost like perfect for each other.
Yeah. But he didn't know he was crazy at the time, so.
I mean, when you are obsessed with justice. Anyway.
Oh yeah, they're totally nuts. Granted, we don't know what he did. And there is the thing of like, it's actually called White Knight Syndrome. It's an actual thing that happens when people do something for somebody else that like saves their life, or perceive that it saves their life. They will fall in love with them. It's almost like the opposite of like how you fall in love with your captor, like that whole kind of thing.
Like Stockholm Syndrome?
Yeah, like Stockholm Syndrome, but it's kind of a little bit of an opposite, because you're not actually being captured by them, but you're being saved by them, or you perceive that they saved your life.
Yeah.
So it's an actual psychological phenomenon. And she kind of is like almost like a stereotypical use case of it, because she's like, oh my God, you saved me. I fell in love with you and I want you to take me with you. And it could have been for something as silly as a cat in a tree. We don't know.
That's true.
Right.
But, you know, him on the other side is like, no, I can't take that. I can only take my reward of being good.
Chivalry is its own reward. Well, we also also know that this is, we know that like legends in this game might not be fully what happened. Like it might just be a parable of something.
Very true. Very true.
That's why I was going to bring up Lancelot and Queen Guinevere from the King Arthur mythos. And it kind of reminds me of that because this whole sarcastic productions that kind of went into the idea of courtly love and chivalry and why that became a big thing in storytelling. And like this, we're in love, but we're, have to look longingly at each other from across the way and never fulfill that, love for each other. We just are courtly loving type of a thing. And it kind of reminds me of that. Like, oh my gosh, my chivalry, my honor, I can't love you. So I'm going to be over here moping about it.
Meanwhile, the main beloved's like, just come over here already. I will kiss you. You will enjoy it. We will be great.
It'll be a fun time.
He's kind of like, no.
I think it was sort of the symbol of his impending doom that he was like, no, I have to keep going with my chivalry and keep seeking justice. And I can't stop and like deal with like romance. I have to actually keep killing monsters.
Yeah, he didn't want to go off his chosen path, which leads to his ultimate destruction.
It was foreshadowing. That was the word I was thinking of.
Yeah. Let's shadow that 4. Let's go.
Let's backtrack real quick then. So we have our white knight who is being courted by the maiden beloved. And, eventually the cataclysm happens. And when the cataclysm happens, Rostam, the person who trained him, dies. And our white knight, Roland, goes on this conquest that Beach just kind of hinted at, where he decides that he is going to fight for justice in any way he can. And he goes off and he starts killing monsters left and right, to the point that all of the items on him become bloodstained, hence his new nickname, the Bloodstained Knight. This includes all of the artifacts mentioned in the Bloodstained Chivalry set, which includes the flower that the main beloved had given him. So he becomes a shadow of himself, basically, but continues to use the terms justice, chivalry, freedom as his reason for doing so. And it's a little denialist. He's refusing to believe that he's turning into the bad guy.
And he's not alone in this, because we know that the Viridescent Venerer went through the same thing, as did Rosaline, aka Senora, who was Rostam's lover. And so when Rostam dies during the cataclysm, we know that Arundhalein, the Grand Master, sort of gave up on everything because he was so heartbroken. We know that Rosaline basically turned evil because she was so heartbroken. And now we have Roland, his student, who, Rostam was very much his mentor. Now he's heartbroken and he is just like hell-bent on justice.
You want to know something? We've mentioned this once or twice before about how they're really digging into like the Mondstadt backstory here. But it's interesting that just about all of these characters that we've mentioned, when Rostam dies, go mad in their own ways. And it's actually very similar to last week when we talked about the death of the Goddess of Flowers. It's almost like a mirror of it, but they happened at the same time too, or at least similar times. They're closer together than anything we see in the current time.
Right.
And
I mean, Goddess of Flowers dies, I think, well before this, but the effect that it has on the two others that were sort of in that threesome with her, it's sort of echoed in this storyline.
Right. No, you're right. And I think it's interesting too, because a lot of these characters, we all have like some ulterior identities for them too. And it's like, why are all these Mondstadt characters potentially like evil, horrible people now? It's so strange, but I digress.
Are you worried that that's what's going to happen to Albedo?
No, I think that the current members of Mondstadt are going to rise above their past And they are going to be great, wonderful people, Tiff.
But we realize that the reason that they are being corrupted and sort of turning evil is because they're slaughtering all of these abyssal monsters. After the cataclysm starts, they're slaughtering abyssal creatures. He's called the Bloodstained Knight because the abyssal blood is spattering his armor. And we know from earlier stories with Child falling into the abyss.
Right.
We know that with Zhao and the other Adepti, that there is this sort of corruption that happens when you're killing abyssal gods and monsters that corrupts you yourself. Like you're being poisoned by killing these monsters. So we know that Viri and Roland are being poisoned by all of the monsters that they're killing in the name of justice. And so that turns both of them into monsters themselves.
And I'm going to imagine that taking a little dip in one of the many bodies of water around Teyvat didn't clean off this coagulated blood that has been spattered all over them, or they were just so nasty they didn't go and try.
Well, you know, if they had just used the new Honkai Star Rail Sampo shampoo.
Oh my
God.
They might have been cured. I don't know.
It's true.
That's just my thought on it. I don't know. You know, he's like better than Bath and Body Works from my understanding. But the Bloodstained Knight, you know, aka Roland, aka White Knight, he goes on this adventure, basically. I say adventure, very lighthearted. He goes on this path of murder, and he actually is the person who kills the viridescent Venerer. And I believe it's in the Hunter's Path bow, there's a description of it, but that bow basically was Viri's. And the Bloodstained Knight says to Viri, so you were just another beast to destroy, tempted by the illusory silhouette of the moon in the water. How strange. For a moment, I thought I saw a maiden lost in the forest. And then he goes all fucking White Knight on us for a minute and goes, I must continue westwards for the sake of justice to settle the crime of twisting man into a beast's form. Which also confirmed to me that at least we know Viridescent died after the cataclysm for sure now. Because the Bloodstained Knight had been Conria at that point. But I skipped ahead because I'm an ass. So I'm going to backtrack again.
Wrap that back.
The Bloodstained Knight goes on this journey and he ends up going to Conria to die, ? He's like given up. He's gonna go, like, imagine that's where you decide to go to like die.
It almost actually doesn't seem like he has good intentions in the side. Like he's like, I'm going to shit. This is not working. I'm horrible. I should just go throw myself into this battle and in one last try to help protect people. I'm going to go to Conria and fight monsters. But this is where it gets a little bit confusing because one of the artifacts actually says that he does that and then he dies in the battlefield. But right after that, he then learns about the Conrian curse.
Yeah, it very much contradicts itself. It says, deep in the abyss where celestial bodies cast no light, the Bloodstained Knight kept his timepiece, though time had lost all meaning. At the end was the Bloodstained Knight's story, for he realized there was no place for him on this earth. He ventured into the fallen ancient kingdom, aka Conria, and died in battle in the monster's lair. At the bottom of the world, he learned the origin of the monsters that destroyed the ancient kingdom. The ancient kingdom was wrongfully cursed, turning its inhabitants into monsters. The code of chivalry tolerates not such injustice. If abyss be thy name, I pledge to you my loyalty. So this is very confusing because it makes it sound like he died and then figured out the curse of Conria and pledged himself to the abyss after death.
Do you think it could have been more of a metaphorical death rather than like legit death?
That's what I was thinking at first. Yeah.
Unless he's legitimately, a zombie.
He cheated up.
She cheated up.
I mean, I think that there was definitely well, he doesn't put it in the same way of when he changed from the White Knight to the Bloodstained Knight. Was there like this like kind of transformation or being called like death.
Well, he was definitely transformed because we know that his face was so transformed monstrously that he actually put on like an iron mask.
Yes.
And that's confirmed in the black sword description, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's the actual shield that's in his artifact set as well. But also in the artifact set is with the feather. The feather is of a raven. And then he realizes as he did turn bad that all of his followers were ravens. And it was because they were drawn to the blood. And typically in a lot of stories and, in some factual things, but a lot of fairy tales and stories, ravens are always kind of shown as a metaphor for death.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that could have been his first death, and maybe then this is his second, and it is that metaphorical kind of changeover that he had in Conria to then when he pledges himself to the abyss.
That could make sense. And I mean, there is something to say with ravens in our IRL life. They're carrion birds, so they're going to just pick whatever they can find and scavenge. And most of the time that's, roadkill and gruesome shit.
The timeline is very weird. It makes it sound like he doesn't realize that the Conrian curse occurred until he was already there fighting.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, this is the ultimate injustice, but then dies / goes into the abyss. But then we also know that he, stumbles upon Viridescent.
Yes, exactly.
While he's on his way to Conria. And at first he's like, oh, there's some maiden in the woods that needs help. But then when he sees her, she is so disfigured by her own like bloody corruption that he thinks that she's a monster. So he kills her. But then while, what Feeny just shared with us is that he's like, I have to keep going westward. So he already knew about the curse when he killed Viri, but then we have this other lore telling us that he learns about it while he's fighting in Conria.
Now, I have a little bit of a theory there. What if there's a second curse?
A second curse?
I would believe that.
A second curse. We know the curse of the Hilly Churl, but we know that Dainsleif is cursed in some way. Have his bodies being wrenched apart.
And same for Clothar. Mm-hmm. He's human when we see him. For those of you who don't know, he is the man, the myth, the legend mentioned during the Kari Bear storyline that we meet. He is totally human. His curse is just living forever.
Oh, yeah, because he was a part of the royal family, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if the royal family curse was known right off the bat. Because they were coming out going, holy shit, like, we can't die. So he's like, oh, they're talking about all these monsters. Let me go fight them. And then he finds out also the twisting of man into a beast. But I will say, I personally think he didn't kill Viri until after he was in Conria. Because he says he's continuing westward. I don't know where west is. I have no idea in this game where westward is.
Well, we know where the door to Conria is, and that actually would be west of where he would have started from. South, but also west.
Because I feel like he's maybe going to like Natlon or something. I don't know, or Leeway. The directions are all amiss. But I feel like he runs into Viri after Conria, personally. I could be very wrong.
So that's a really interesting theory because maybe he went to fight at Conria and then he finds out about the ultimate injustice and then he pledges himself to the abyss. Maybe the abyss grants him another chance or a new life or saves him from death. And then that's when he puts on the iron mask and becomes something else.
Let me tell you, he's a hot mess, this guy. A, but B, doesn't this sound a little too similar to our sibling?
How so?
Our sibling went to Conria, saw what happened, and then eventually pledged themselves to the abyss.
Oh.
Yes. I mean, the key differences are hopefully our sibling didn't murder a bunch of people.
Oh, our sibling totally did. Are you kidding me? Come on. Our sibling is willing to murder anyone who follows an Archon at this point, in my opinion.
You think so?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I know they're willing to order people things to murder. So I guess there's not really a difference.
And I also think it's interesting that, in the Hunter's Path weapon, he says, I must continue westwards for the sake of justice to settle the crime. It's kind of like how our sibling and us are all on a journey, continuing our journey to, I don't know, we're not trying to settle justice and crime. We're trying to find our sibling.
That's true, but we are going westward. Like, we went west. We did go south to Inazuma, but we are continually going westward.
South and west.
South and west. Southwestern.
Yeah, because Inazuma would be southeast.
I will say, there's been a lot of theories that, like, we are following the same path that our sibling did, and that our sibling we know is on a path for justice. I'm not trying to say that our sibling is the Bloodstained Knight, because I definitely don't think that. But I think it's interesting, and I think even our path, we started out as, I'm looking for my sibling, but along the way, we have been doing lots of justice and crime settling.
If the Bloodstained Knight is still alive and they did join the Abyss Order, it would make sense that they joined at the same time as our sibling, because we know that our sibling started out, or allegedly started out, in Teyvat during the Cataclysm, and they met Dainsleif at the Battle of the Cataclysm.
I think it's interesting that our sibling didn't meet Dainsleif until the battle. Our sibling had been in Conria for like a few years. Again, another weird like timeline thing where you're like, is there a weird time loop? What the fuck is going on?
Well, you think that our sibling was here and in Conria? Or like, could it have just been the years leading up to the battle?
I mean, I thought that our sibling either appeared or woke up during the Cataclysm. Like, that was their first sort of conscious introduction to this world. And that could be wrong, but that's how I interpret things.
Interesting.
We've talked a lot about our sibling and us, and like, what is the discrepancy between when they woke up and when we woke up, and were we traveling a lot across Teyvat and we maybe don't remember things, and there's a lot of questions about that. We do know that Dainsleif and our sibling went back to Conria now after the fight.
Yeah.
So I wonder if they met the Bloodstained Knight in there even.
Yeah, because we don't know if he's dead. Like, well, I mean, so if we take that the words that he died are metaphorical and he did live on after that, we don't know if he then, I mean, it's been 500 years, but I mean, I guess people live very long in Teyvat, but did he still hang around? Was he still alive? Do he still have a lot to do with all this stuff? Was he trancing around with Dainsleif?
Could he have sacrificed his like mortal self to join the Abyss Order? Is that what you have to do?
Yeah. So now here's the interesting thing. So we're talking about it quite a bit, about how he said he pledged himself to the Abyss, but there are theories out there that he is a part of the Fatui, which would have meant he needed to pledge his loyalty to the Tsaritsa.
Right. Yeah, there is a theory. I mean, I don't know who else besides us has come up with this theory.
Oh, it's everywhere. Yeah, no, it's a very common theory.
We came up with this theory that the Bloodstained Knight is Il Capitano.
Yes.
Which makes sense because we know that he wears some kind of mask.
And it's also in the Winter's Night Lazzo, in that Fatui teaser trailer for the Harbingers, at Signora's funeral. Capitano says something very poignant. Though her method tarnished her honor, Signora's sacrifice is a great pity. And this is the first thing we hear him say, and he's directly referencing honor. And it's like, well, this is odd because you would think Fatui Harbingers wouldn't care for honor. They're, semi-sleazy, but that's the very first thing he says. He's talking about honor, and he has an iron mask.
The honor, though, I think they look at honor differently. And I think that they honor, I mean, they are completely loyal and everything to the Tsaritsa. So I think it might not be the same as we would accept it to be. But I think even like within every microcosm within this Teyvat world, each of these group, they all think they're right. They all think that they're doing the best thing, and they all kind of have something that they look at as a leader or to have some sort of loyalty or honor to.
Yeah, and I think that we'll learn a lot more about the Fatui and Fontaine, but I do really like this theory that the Bloodstained Knight is Il Capitano, because I think that, we've talked about how the Fatui and the Abyss Order have like this puzzling similarity in their end goal of overthrowing Celestia. So it's easy to think about like someone from one faction going over to the other.
Absolutely. And I do want to just throw out one quick question before we take a deep dive into the Capitano theory, because I am a huge proponent of this. But just to backtrack too a little bit to the fact that the Bloodstained Knight pledged himself to the Abyss, that brings to me a question of timeline again. From the Kari Bear storyline, we know that Clothar started the Abyss, and we know that he hung out with our sibling for a while, and we know that he had been out of the Cataclysm for X number of years, like an unknown number of years too at that point. I feel like when we originally did Kari Bear, we felt like he had been out of the Abyss for 100 years. And that wouldn't be possible if the Abyss had already been started by the time the Bloodstained Knight got into Conria, because the Bloodstained Knight, I'm assuming, is still humanoid. When he enters Conria, like, he wouldn't be able to live that long. So I did just want to mention that there is another interesting kind of timeline question going on here of, like, how long was it between when the Cataclysm happened to when Clothar created the Abyss Order?
Yeah.
Or is it possible that the Bloodstained Knight didn't necessarily pledge allegiance to the Abyss Order, but just like the Abyss Realm, which brings a whole other fucking plethora of questions with it.
Yeah. No, that's a great way to look at that. That really is. Like, because, yeah, it's not the Abyss Order, it's just the Abyss, like this thing.
What if the Bloodstained Knight is the voice in the crystal that Clothar hears?
Oh my god, that would make so much fucking sense.
Oh my god.
Would it though?
Yes, because like we went over last week with Deshret and everything, when Conria caused all this shit and caused the Cataclysm to happen, it was because they ripped a tear into the Abyss. Right? So the Abyss was already kind of bleeding into Conria at that point. So it would be interesting if he went to the Abyss and he probably could take over all the monsters in the Abyss. And he could be, if he did like give up his life and his like human existence to join the Abyss and like live forever or whatever, he definitely could be that ominous voice talking out of the Abyss, trying to corrupt someone, you know, even though he wouldn't see it like that. He'd be like, justice for all.
It's like the ultimate injustice, and he sort of pledges himself to the Abyss, then yeah, it would make sense that he would basically use the fissure between worlds to recruit other people. Like he could be the origin of the Abyss Order.
But also think of all those hilichurls that are coming back to that crystal and like bowing and, you know, being irreverent and all that kind of stuff. If he changed himself and gave up his human life for them, that could be looked at as a savior. And we can, oh my God, we can just bring it all back to White Knight syndrome. These hilichurls in that cavern have White Knight syndrome.
And the crystal, he calls himself a sinner.
Oh,
that's
then
right.
That makes sense too. Mind is balloon. I'm all over this.
And it would be interesting too, you know, he does speak very like, oh dear creature, why do you bow down? For a power that you covet. It would be very interesting if he learned when he joined the Abyss too that he was a sinner, right? Because he probably was like, this is just a theory, of course, but if he was killing hilitrolls the entire time, and then got to Conria and realized he had been killing human beings the entire time, he might have considered himself a sinner at that point too. And that might be another greater reason for him to give himself to the Abyss at that point.
I consider myself a sinner every time I have to kill a hilichurl now. I get so sad when there's just a random dead hilichurl just hanging about. I get so upset about it because I'm like, oh, no, sad. It hurts. I'm like that kid who after watches a Disney movie then like won't eat fish anymore because they watched Finding Nemo.
I mean, you had a point though. You can't eat Nemo or his dad.
Can we talk about his brother?
Yes.
I don't know. Can we?
So talked about this in the Viri episode, but in one of the newer artifact sets, the Deepwood Memories set, there's reference to a young blind boy whose brother was a knight, and he kind of just, you know, went off.
A white knight.
a white knight kind of following him. He was blind, and he ends up being the blind boy, or we suspect it's the blind boy that Viri finds dying in the woods.
Or was he dying? So we know that Roland's brother, he was blind and he was wandering different kingdoms in Teyvat, sort of following in the footsteps of his brother. He was also obsessed with justice. And we know that his path crossed with Viridescence. And we know that he was killed by a monster, but while he was dying, Viri found him and he actually gave his bow to Viri. And Viri ended up killing the monster that killed him. And this was sort of the first time that she killed out of vengeance instead of the hunt, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. And so that sort of led her down the path of, retribution. And it really put her on the same type of path that the Bloodstained Knight was on, which is ironic because, this was set in action by the Bloodstained Knight's brother.
Okay.
She got her weapon from him. She killed for him. And that led her onto this path of destruction and corruption. And then she ended up getting killed by the Bloodstained Knight.
Isn't that insane? Like, why is this so full fucking circle? And it's interesting, too, that they, purposely hid all this lore in, artifact sets. So it's you want to know about all these people who are major plot points in the old Mondstadt lore and possibly in-game still? Well, good fucking luck. You can't even find it in the library.
It's also really interesting to think about what motivated them all to go down this path, because it seems very clear that blood of the abyssal creatures that they were murdering left and right really corrupted them. And we've touched on that with Child when he fell down into the abyss as a kid, and with Zhao and the other adepti who were slaughtering gods, and the poison of the gods that were affecting them. It seems very clear that the more abyssal creatures you kill, the more likely you are to become evil and monstrous yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I think our siblings evil too. Just saying. And it's interesting too, because we know Skara went into the abyss a lot, but we don't know what he did down there. We don't know if he was killing people.
We also don't know what the effects of the abyss on a puppet is.
Right.
Yeah, he's got a twofold thing. We don't know what's going on over there.
It's true. I mean, he's technically not living. Is he made of wood? Maybe.
We would know that. Herda is made of wood, is made of parts,
So I would have a hard time thinking if the abyss basically sucks life out of things. Something that has a manufactured life, would that be affected?
Another question about it in regards to the Bloodstained Knight is that, was he killing abyssal monsters before he gave his life away too, or after? How evil would he be at that point?
I think we could possibly say yes, because Viri was killing abyssal monsters, and that's what turned her kind of cuckoo bananas. It really fucked her over.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's why he killed her, because she was kind of becoming monster so it's likely that the more abyssal things that you kill and the more you're affected by that, the more you turn into an abyssal creature.
What's really disturbing is that it seems like it affects their physical being, because he started wearing the iron mask because his face got so distorted,
right,
and creature and we know that with Viri, she actually looked at herself in a pool of water and was oh, I'm no different than a beast myself. So we can only assume that means that she was also monstrous looking, and that's why he killed her.
It's also a common thread though, but Rosaline does the same thing.
Oh yeah, she starts hiding her face.
Yeah, she puts the hat on. She wore a hat that it was this way she didn't when she was burning the monsters, it stopped her from being distracted, and also to be able to kind of stay focused on them. But it also made her not be able to see her burnt face in the water reflection. So it kind of kept her at this arm's length from how bad she had gotten. So it is a common element we see in a lot of these stories. I mean, with her, we know that she's real because we see her in the game. And we can assume by the rest of the history and things like that, that the Bloodstained Knight actually is a person. The Maiden Beloved is an actual person. But there are, like we mentioned very early on, they could just be parables and fairy tales. You know, we've been proven that in Sumeru, the Aranara were always looked at as fairy tales. They're very real. So it could go either way. But it's interesting to see the history or the kind of the transition that they go through is very on point with one another.
This is like the one negative thing about not having Signora as a playable character, in my opinion. Like, I never wanted Signora. Sorry. I just did not. I don't like playing.
There's a lot of reasons why it's bad that we don't have her as a playable character.
But one of the reasons that I think it's terrible is because we would get her voice lines and we would actually get to see if she talks about these characters that she would have known. Mm-hmm. Because even though she's not really mentioned in Roland's story, we know she knew him because his trainer, Rostam, was Signora's boyfriend. So they would have known each other. But I do want to backtrack now, just back to the Capitano theory. And I want to give you guys kind of a painting of what Capitano is like. For travelers who don't know, Capitano is one of the Fatui Harbingers. It is unknown what number he is, but he is either 4th or 10th. Him and the Knave are the only two that aren't properly numbered right now. So 4th or 10th. If Capitano is the Bloodstained Knight, I would think he might be 4th, but that's just my vibe, obviously. We only see Capitano once, and that is in the Schneznayen trailer that Al mentioned earlier, where he says how sad it was that, you know, Signora sacrificed her honor, basically. And I think it's interesting because she is called, and I'm going to your pronunciation, Lowfalter by Capitano, and Lowfalter is German, which we say that everything in Mondstadt is German. But besides that, the things that we know about Capitano is that he is a great fighter. Child says that he's seen him in battle and that he's hoping that one day he'll be able to fight him. But right now, Child is too low ranked for him to even notice him. What a fangirl. Skara, on the other hand, says that Capitano is ever righteous, but also brave and fearless, nigh invincible. He says, even my mechanical ears demand maintenance after listening to so many compliments. And he actually thinks that, like, him being so righteous is a danger, which is interesting because we see that with the Bloodstained Knight. Another character that mentions Capitano is Mika. For our travelers who might not have been able to play the Of Ballads and Brew event that happened in Mondstadt recently, it's when we were first introduced to Mika Micah, as I like to call him. And we find out, has been traveling around with Varka, and he is sent back with a letter from Varka. Mika says that he met the Fatui Harbinger known as the Captain, and that he couldn't even imagine how to deal with an opponent like him. And then Mika basically is like, I suck, I need to go train. And I'm never going to live up to that. But on top of that, Mika actually has met the captain or Capitano, whatever you want to call him, on a more serious level, where he was actually traveling with Varka. They had entered like a dangerous, restricted area. And I don't remember what Mika was doing, but all of a sudden he could tell that something was going wrong, and he could smell gunpowder in the air, which honestly, gunpowder? Where are their guns? Like,
where are their guns that need powder? Because the only gun we have is the big old guy with the ice shooting kind of cannon.
Well, the little fire guy in the Fatui has a gun. Yeah, but like, does this mean that Mondstadt, like the Knights of Favonius, have guns? Got a lot of questions about that. But basically, Mika says that when he emerges from his tent, he goes to figure out what's going on, that there have been battle lines drawn between the Fatui and the Knights of Favonius that are being led by Varka. Mika says that later on, he finds out that something had happened and they had come across each other, and like this skirmish had kind of started between the two groups. And he specifically says that in the middle of like the Fatui, he could see a very distinct silhouette, eerily dark blue eyes that seem to glow with an uncanny aura. And eventually, like, Varka goes up to the Capitano, they talk it out, man to man, you know, very bro-esque, and everything's cleared up, and Varka is like, man, I would have loved to invite that guy to a duel. And I'm like, Varka, no. And then he also says, and it's not like he's a stubborn fellow. He was very well aware that engaging in a battle in a strange and foreign land would have been disadvantageous for both of us. And in the letter that Mika brings back during the Of Ballads and Brew event, Varka's letter actually says the Capitano was on his way to Natlon, which is interesting because we were just like, was Bloodstained Knight going west toward Natlon? We don't know.
I really do hope we get to see a little bit more of these Fatui Harbingers in the next place release.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're definitely hinting at it. I think the fact that we got to see a video of all of them.
Yeah, we're going to see more of them.
But I just want to say that I think it's very interesting that they are also selling Capitano as righteous, fearless, brave, just. He's talking about justice with Signora. And also, a random fact, Victor, our favorite Fatui NPC who starts off in Mondstadt and then goes to Sumeru, even says that he would much rather work under Capitano. And I don't know, there's something about Varka and him getting along.
Wait, more than who? More than the Tsaritsa? Or
No, Victor is working under Pantalone, I believe, right now.
Oh.
Yeah, whatever Victor is doing right now, he's doing things for Pantalone, basically. So he said that he would much rather work under Capitano because he looks up to Capitano. Which is interesting because Victor, I think, is like this immorally gray character right now where he's in the Fatui, but he kind of wants to help that little girl in Mondstadt who has a lot of family drama going on. Jesus.
Lily's got a lot going on. Her mother,
But I also think that, all of you were mentioning earlier that the Bloodstained Knight ends up wearing like an iron mask. When we see Capitano, he has on an iron mask. We have no idea what his face looks like. I definitely think there's a lot of suggestions that they could be the same character, but that's still up to interpretation, of course. I do think the theory's pretty strong, though.
Yeah, I think it definitely is. I think what it really comes down to is that timeline and those slight discrepancies and how you want to interpret those moments when he was in Conria. But it is a very strong theory.
It almost feels too easy, but the fact that he's allegedly dead and allegedly joined the Abyss makes it more likely. So I don't know.
Yes, exactly. It's like they're kind of throwing you these loops where it's like it could and it couldn't be. It's kind of like when they were hardcore suggesting for a very long time that Piero was Kaya's father. And then they threw that fucking wrench out with Kari Bear. Because I'm not gonna lie, when they released Midsummer Lotso, or like Midwinter Lotso, whatever.
A Winter Nights Lotso.
Listen, they released it in Midsummer. So when they released the Winter Nights Lotso, everyone who saw Piero in that moment immediately went to Twitter and was like, also has an eye patch. Yes, dad confirmed. Like,
same eyes.
Same eyes. Yeah, like Twitter went wild. And so I honestly feel like they might have done that a little on purpose. And when they came out with the Kari Bear questline and you find out that Kaya is a descendant of Clothar and you find out that Clothar was a member of the royalty in Conria because he's cursed with eternity, not a hilly trollness. And you find out that he's the founder of the Abyss and that Kaya is a descendant of the founder of the Abyss. You're like, oh shit, well, it can't be Piero because Piero was alive during the Cataclysm and he wasn't cursed like that we know of. So, interesting thoughts. I also would like to mention one other interesting fact I found when doing my deep dive on Il Capitano. So I mentioned earlier that, Capitano's number in the Fatui is not known, right? He's 4th or 10th. I'd like to believe that he's 4th just because that would mean he got recruited sooner. And I think it lends more to the Capitano is Bloodstained Knight theory. But at the same time, our other character who is an unknown number is the Knave, who we have previously theorized could be Viri. Now, that was, I think, a much less hardcore theory. But it made me want to know who the first 3 Harbingers were officially. And they're Piero, Dottore, and then Columbina, who is also known as the Damselet. And I don't know, I just thought it was really interesting that she sings and the Maiden Beloved sings. And I don't know, maybe there's a possibility that they're also the same person because she's that crazy bitch, man.
Yeah.
She's also known as the Maiden. That's like one of her code names too. I don't know. It's just really interesting.
I mean, it could be, but it also could be like, Yunjin sings too, and she's not the Maiden. So.
Wait, what? What did you just say?
I said Yunjin sings and she's not the Maiden. So, but it could be a tie-in, but it also could be something as simple as it's just singing.
Right.
I will say, Child does say about the damselet, she goes, when it comes to her, something just doesn't feel right. Anyway, you should just be careful around her. I just think that that's really interesting because we just kind of talked about how she seems a little cray-cray.
Yeah.
And Skara also says that if we were to approach her, that with our conscience, we should stay away from her.
Now, is she also the one in the Winter Nights Lotso? Is she the one crying on the coffin?
Singing on the coffin.
Oh, that's singing. I mistook her singing as
she's literally like, Senora, you fucking bitch. I'm glad you're dead. Stay away from Capitano. Like, I wouldn't put it past her.
Yeah. But I did have one thing, and I don't think it's actually something to add, but I'm a very visual person. So with the idea of the royalty of Conria escaping, as everybody else is turning into a hilly churl, I'm obsessed with the door to Conria. And in my brain, all I saw was that door being flung open and all these Richies running out hello, motherfucker. I gotta get the hell out of here.
And they're met at the door by Capitano as the Bloodstained Knight being like, get back in there, evil doers.
Yeah.
And then they're like, no, we're in the woods being attacked. He's like, oh shit. Well, travelers, I do think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for going back to old Mondstadt with us and having some nostalgic feels. We all were missing Viri a lot, so it's nice to kind of talk about this little motley crew again. Just a reminder to travelers, if you liked this week's topic, you had some theories or thoughts around it, or you'd like to tell us topics you'd like to see in the future, please feel free to email us at talestofthebotpod@gmail.com. Otherwise, next week, we are going to be talking about Rosaria. So we're going to be staying in Mondstadt. Woohoo! Otherwise, travelers, safe journeys. We'll see you next time.
Bye, chivalrous nerds.